What's good everyone, it's BBKDRAGOON here today with tips on finding the right sensitivity for you in Destiny 2. This is an important topic that I've covered on the channel a lot over the last 4 years. Really, the key trick with finding the right sensitivity is giving yourself the proper amount of time to adapt for the muscle memory and to find a sensitivity that works well for you and your playstyle. Today I've got 2 Clash gameplays in the background that I think will show some fairly good tracking and shot strengths in my duels. The second match I even bumped into Sir Demetrius on the other team. He was solo queuing, as was I. They win by 2 points, but I think I was able to hold my ground pretty well on the scoreboard and definitely tried as hard as I could. So there is no one perfect sensitivity. You can't just say 6 is it, and that's the best for everyone. Everybody has a different playstyle, and everyone has a slightly different way of aiming. The majority of experienced players do, however, play between sensitivity 3 and 6. Now, there are strong players who play on 7 and above, and there are also strong players who play on 2 and below, but the majority do fall between 3 and 6, making this a really great starting place if you are a newer player. There are a few things to consider with a higher sensitivity. You'll be able to adapt and react to flanks much easier than a player who plays on 3 or 4. If you're an aggressive player who likes to push with shotgun, SMG, auto, or sidearm, and you're getting into close range encounters often, you may be more comfortable on a sensitivity of 5 or higher so that you can track your enemy's movements while getting up close and personal. Very high sensitivities, however, can make tracking during shot strings very challenging unless you're an extremely comfortable player on the sticks. Lower sensitivities like 5 and below can sometimes make these tracking opponent sections during shot strings a lot easier. Again, for some players, not for all of them. There are some exceptionally good high sensitivity players who can track super well, so I'm not making a blanket statement here that high sense players don't have good tracking. Some very well do. But a lot of times newer, inexperienced players, when they go to the high sensitivities, throw their tracking abilities out the window. So similarly, there are low sensitivity players who position well and don't have to react to flanks in a detrimental way. I will point out something that is really important though with Destiny 2 on console, and that is just how tight the field of view is within Destiny. The field of view is how much is visible on your screen at one time. You can see here on the PC at FOV of 105, you can see way more to your left and right. On console, this really narrow field of view can make tracking opponents up close really hard. On slower sensitivities, this can feel awkward and challenging to deal with an enemy that's up in your grill, or let's say you're trying to rush them down using a shotgun or sword. It can be really tough to keep track of where they are, especially if they jump above you. This is where the higher sensitivities offer some advantage. So those are the basic principles behind the two sides of the spectrum when it comes to sensitivity selection. For beginner players, brand new players, I really recommend starting somewhere between 3 and 6, and you can fine-tune from there. Experienced players, start wherever you want and fine-tune wherever you want. You've played console shooters before, you know how this song and dance works. Now onto the really critical part of this video, and that is how you actually find that perfect sensitivity for you. No perfect sensitivity for everybody, but the right one for you. First of all, you need to experiment in order to pin down the sensitivity that fits you best. However, you really want to avoid the giant pitfall that the majority of inexperienced players make when they try to find their sense. You cannot, and I repeat, cannot play on a sense for just 2 or 3 games and expect for your muscle memory to adapt properly. You must play with a sense for a significant portion of time before you can make an accurate and critical decision about whether it's right for you or not. At a bare minimum, I always recommend 2 to 4 hours of gameplay with a particular sensitivity before you make any sort of feedback decisions on whether it's comfortable for you or not. What often happens is a player will change their sense. Let's say a 5 sense player jumps to 7, plays 2 or 3 games, does poorly, and says, well, this sense stinks, this isn't for me. That doesn't give your brain any time whatsoever to adjust or adapt to that sensitivity. Sensitivity and strong aiming is really all about muscle memory. You don't ever want to be actively thinking about aiming during a gunfight. It really needs to be second nature. You want to be thinking more about your terrain, the strafe that you're employing, the abilities you have up, how you're going to be landing those precision shots as he pops around the corner. So to only play 20 or 30 minutes on a new sensitivity doesn't allow your body or mind to adapt and become comfortable with it. So all sensitivities will feel awkward and uncomfortable until you can adjust. So I recommend, again, at minimum 2 to 4 hours when trying to find your baseline sensitivity. More is obviously better here, but I wouldn't go any under that mark. After that point, assess your gameplay. How do you feel on the sticks? And here's the big one, record your gameplay. Now that Destiny 2 is only on the current gen consoles, both Xbox One and PS4, players have access to the DVR feature. Record parts of your gameplay. Go back and watch through those clips and look very, very closely at your gunfights, particularly your duels with other players. Not the situations where 4 guys are rushing you down at once, but the ones where you're in a one-on-one with an opponent. Are your shot strings landing? Are you able to track your opponent effectively? Are the crosshairs swinging wildly past your opponent when you try and snap onto target? When you watch back your footage, you can look for what we call under-aim or over-aim. This is really the point when you should be sweet spotting your sensitivity, so this would be a little bit later in the process of the fine-tuning your sense. A good way to look for over-aiming is when you watch the footage back and you try to snap onto a target, an enemy emerges on a part of the screen you weren't expecting, you didn't pre-aim there. Do your crosshairs go past them and then pull back onto them? Is this a reoccurring pattern? Under-aim is a little bit harder to see and to identify, but is it like taking you a slightly longer amount of time than normal to get the crosshairs on an opponent and to follow them successfully? Do you consistently stop just a few pixels short of where you should? These are both good indicators to help you dial in that last little bit for the right sensitivity for you. But again, don't go too overboard here. After you've played with the sense for like 3 or 4 hours, you will probably know if this feels comfortable for you and your playstyle. I'll conclude by saying again, there is no one perfect sensitivity. It's different for every player and their playstyle. Take your time. That's really the key takeaway from this whole video, is just take your time. When trying to find your sensitivity, don't rush it, and I promise it will pay off in the long run if you take that time. Swallow your pride, understand that for a few hours you may be having some low scoring and uncomfortable matches, but the reward is definitely more than worth it. Another quick tip that some players like and other players really don't is turning off your vibration. You can do this in the settings. I'll cover this more in the button layout tip video that's up next, but having your controller operate more like a mouse and keyboard in which it doesn't vibrate in your hand while you're under pressure is a huge aid to a lot of players. You still have all the visual indicators on screen to know when you're being shot. Just like a PC shooter, there are on-screen elements that indicate when and where you're being shot from. This is a tip that transformed my gameplay back in Halo Reach over 5 years ago. It won't work for everybody. There are pros who play with vibration and those who don't, but I wanted to add that in here at the end. I play on 4 sensitivity, and there are situations in which I really wish I played on 5 and 6, but for the most part, I really try and position myself in a way that I can land my shot strings and be as effective as possible in duels, and 4 has been what works for me. Doesn't mean there are situations where I don't wish I had, a sense of 6 or 7. So, like I said, no one perfect sensitivity, but finding the one that's right for you, and when you finally do fine-tune it into that really comfortable space, it's going to transform your gameplay as well. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please thumbs it up and subscribe for more Destiny 2 tips and weapon reviews. GG to Sir Demetrius, that was a fun match, and they played well. Have a great day, Guardians, and we'll talk with you next time.